Hey everyone, it's Reilly. If you listened to last week's episode, then you probably heard me and Sota talk about TV shows and movies. So I mentioned a movie that I like, Kaibutsu, or Monster in English, but it seems kind of silly for me to recommend a Japanese movie to a Japanese audience. But if you haven't seen it, I really think you should. But I didn't talk so much about TV shows because, to be honest, I haven't watched a lot of TV shows recently. I've been watching more movies and kind of generally just trying to not watch too much TV or anything if I can avoid it. Should be reading books or studying or doing something else. But I do have some favorite TV shows. So in this episode, I'd like to kind of tell you about some of my favorite TV shows and then maybe one or two that I've seen a bit of but haven't finished, but I have heard are really good and that I think would be good to watch if you have time or you can find them. One of them might be a little bit difficult to find, actually, but I'll get into that later. Anyway, without further ado, I should do Instagram. Sorry, so my Instagram is Reilly Sullivan XD and Sota is eigonosota. And now, without any further ado, let's get into it. Okay, yeah, so kind of a weird one to start off, but my favorite TV show of all time is not actually an English language TV show. So if you want to watch a TV show for practicing English listening or something like that, probably not the one you should watch, but if you want to watch a TV show just because it's a good or interesting TV show, then you should watch this one. It's called Dark. It's a German TV show that I think was made for Netflix. Anyway, I watched it on Netflix, and I'm pretty sure it's still there, and you can watch it. It's 3 seasons, so not like a super long thing to get into. And it came out in 2017. It's kind of a sci-fi show. There's like there's time travel in it. But it's not super crazy like sci-fi. They don't go into space or anything like that. It kind of all takes place in this one town in kind of the middle of nowhere, almost in Germany, I think it's in the Black Forest region. So the Black Forest is in like southwest Germany, South Germany. And it's kind of famous for a lot of like... what would you say, fairy tales and things like that. A lot of those kind of famous German stories, legends, take place in the Black Forest. I don't know if any of these specifically do, but stuff like Little Red Riding Hood or Hansel and Gretel, those kind of fairy tales, I think a lot of them take place in this Black Forest. So anyway, putting the setting of the TV show in the Black Forest kind of gives it this kind of mysterious, legendary or whatever kind of aspect right from the beginning. But on the other flip side, at the beginning of the show, there's nothing super weird about this town. It seems like kind of a normal, like countryside town, with families and things like that. And, some of the families have problems, but that's not super strange or fantastical, like a fantasy in any way. But then pretty quickly, things start to get weird. The main character basically starts time traveling. And I don't want to reveal too much of the show, but the plot is really interesting. It gets really kind of complicated, and because there's different kind of timelines. There's like a past and a present, and I think there's even a future at some point. But mostly it takes place kind of like nowadays, something like in the 2010s, and then like not much longer than like, they barely go like 100 years earlier than that. So mostly it's kind of in like the modern day, just in different generations, you could say, like 20 years ago, 50 years ago, something like that. And because of that, I think the show talks a lot about like the connections between people, family, and also like, like neighbors, people in a town. And it also talks about maybe kind of the importance of place and like how the place where you are affects your behavior or affects other people's behavior. And it also obviously talks about time and kind of the nature of time. What is time like? I think we usually think of time as kind of going in a straight line. There's like the past and then it goes to the future. But there's another way of thinking about time where it's like cyclical or circular, like time kind of comes around back to itself. This show maybe talks a little bit more about that, and also about, maybe time is not just one line. Maybe time is kind of mixed together, you could say. It's kind of complicated, obviously, and I don't want to give too much of the show away, but it's my favorite show. It's not a super light-hearted show. It's a pretty serious show, so if you want something, a little lighter, then maybe Dark is not the show for you, as you can maybe tell by the name. Okay, next, a lighter one, in some ways, is a show called Derry Girls. This one is in English, although the characters are from Northern Ireland, so they have a pretty strong Northern Irish accent. To be honest, when I watched it, I had subtitles on because I couldn't understand a lot of what they were saying in English. So it takes place in Northern Ireland, as I said, which is part of the UK. So I think it originally aired on the BBC, but it's on Netflix now too. I watched it on Netflix. It came out in 2018, so it's a pretty recent show, but the story takes place in the 90s. And pretty much all the main characters are like teenage girls, maybe high school age or something, 15 or something like that. 16, whatever. And the 90s in Northern Ireland were a pretty tough time. The kind of politics of the time was complicated, you could say, difficult. It was kind of the end of what is called the Troubles in Ireland, where there were groups of people fighting. Some people wanted Ireland to be one country, the island of Ireland, to be joined together as one country. Other people wanted Northern Ireland to remain part of the UK, and so people were fighting over that. And so this mostly just takes place kind of in normal high school or daily life of these girls, but there's a lot of kind of stuff going on in the background of the show that has to do with the kind of politics of that time in Northern Ireland. But even though that sounds kind of serious, most of the show is really funny. I mean, it's a comedy, and it's really, really funny. My favorite character is the kind of one of the teachers at the school. I guess you could say she's something like the principal of the school. So the girls in the show go to like a Catholic school. So it's, a Christian school, and Catholic, with the politics of the day, Catholic people tended to side more with the kind of Irish side, meaning the Republican side, or the side that wants Ireland to be one country. So they went to this Catholic school, and the principal is a nun, meaning like a kind of religious person who devotes her life to the religion, I guess. But the funny part is that this nun is not very religious. Like at some points, it's not even clear if she believes in God, and stuff like that. But anyway, maybe I'm not explaining how funny it is, but it's a really, really funny show. It's probably the show that I laughed the most at that I've watched in the last 10 years. After that are some older shows. Maybe the classic American TV show of the last, of my lifetime, is called Sopranos, or The Sopranos. And it's from, I want to say it's from about 2000. Let me double check. It came out in 1999, so about 2000, right? And it takes place, the main character is a mafia boss, so like a gangster, right? And he lives in this nice house in the suburbs in New Jersey, which is a state pretty close to like New York City. And, if you have kind of stereotypes about New York City gangsters, like Godfather or Goodfellas, movies like that, it's kind of like that, except this show is also kind of a comedy. Again, it's dark because he's a gangster. You know, there's a lot of violence in the show, but there's also a lot of humor. The kind of main point of the show, one of the main points of the show is that this mob boss, Tony Soprano, has panic attacks. He has anxiety. So he goes to a therapist to talk about his kind of mental health problems. And at the same time, you know, he's running a crime family, you know, killing people and all kinds of different crimes. But he's also a dad. So there's, you know, he has kids and a wife and stuff like that. So it's a kind of weird mixture of drama and comedy that is, like, I think super important for modern American television. Like, I think a lot of the stuff that came out since 2000 owes a lot of what it is to The Sopranos. So if you've ever heard of Breaking Bad, Breaking Bad is a show about a high school chemistry teacher who ends up becoming like a drug dealer. He makes meth, which is a kind of drug that people smoke. Anyway, that he can make because he's a chemistry teacher. So kind of like Tony Soprano, he's this character in Breaking Bad. Walter White is the teacher's name. And they're both kind of these characters that are likable. They seem to have kind of good intentions a lot of the time, but they're obviously bad people. You know, one is a criminal gangster who is responsible for people dying, and the other one is a drug dealer. So it's this kind of anti-hero idea. But and there's probably several other shows that I can't think of right now that also kind of owe this kind of idea to The Sopranos. And then I should do one more comedy. To be honest, I don't watch a lot of like sitcoms on TV, but one that I watched kind of as a kid and come back to every now and again, even now, is Seinfeld. So Seinfeld it's a comedy show that takes place in New York City. It's about kind of a group of friends that just kind of live their lives. You know, they're dating. One of them, the main guy, Seinfeld, is a comedian. He's a stand-up comedian, which is true. The actual actor, also named Seinfeld, Jerry Seinfeld, is a stand-up comedian. So the show is maybe close to his real life. I'm not sure. But the kind of the thing they often say in the show, in fact, there's an episode in the show where they're trying to make a TV show, and they call it the show about nothing. Because really there's not a whole lot of stuff going on in the show. There's not really like a plot that you could say this happens. It's kind of mostly different changes in the plot, or like Jerry Seinfeld dating different women and stuff like that. But a whole lot of wacky things happen, and there's a lot of kind of crazy characters. And a lot of these characters and a lot of what the characters say are still things that people, you know, say in daily conversation now 20 years later. I think Seinfeld also came out maybe in the mid to late 90s or early 2000s, something like that. I'm trying to think of any other shows. I mean, there's a bunch of other kind of like what's called prestige TV. Oh, I didn't mention, sorry, prestige TV. So that's like, it started with HBO. HBO is this, I don't know if it's in Japan, but it was kind of a paid service that before there was Netflix and stuff, you could pay for HBO to get kind of, I don't know, higher budget TV shows, and you could watch movies and stuff on it. It was like an extra paid channel on top of regular TV. And so like prestige TV kind of comes out of that. And now obviously there's Netflix and Amazon Prime and all these other things that have kind of higher budget TV shows. But, you know, HBO is pretty popular for stuff like Game of Thrones. Recently there was Succession, which is a show about like a rich family who have to choose like who the next boss of the rich family's company will be, because the main boss is not well. He's sick. So So yeah, there's a few shows for you. Dark, Dairy Girls, Sopranos, Seinfeld, Game of Thrones if you want. It's a classic kind of fantasy historical TV show, and then Succession. I think, Dark and Dairy Girls you can watch on TV, on Netflix. Seinfeld, I think I have seen it on Netflix before, but I don't know if it's something that's like always there, and I don't know if it would be on Japanese Netflix or not. Sopranos, Succession, and Game of Thrones, I'm not sure what the best way is to watch them because they're HBO shows, so I don't know if HBO is available in Japan. I don't know what the best way to get them would be, but I'm sure if you do enough searching on the internet, you will be able to find them. Anyway, I hope you can watch at least one of those shows and enjoy it, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.